rubber pen. Too fast.
Forward.
Into the darkness.
Welcome to Slash Forward, the channel where we provide summarization and commentary on all your favorite popular and obscure horror movies. In this video, we're going back to camp to take a look at the 1988 film Cheerleader Camp, originally titled Bloody Pom Poms. This movie got stuck in distribution limbo, undergoing a name change before being released straight to video. All that despite the fact that the film has the combined star power of a 1988 Leif Garrett and Lucinda Dickey of Breakin' and Breakin' 2 fame. Apparently this just wasn't enough, but at least we know we can be certain of two things. This movie will contain some acting, and at least one dance sequence. Now, let's quietly observe how well they integrated these elements into the movie. We open on an unusual scene as Allison, our main character and titular cheerleader, is seen wandering around a dark, empty locker room. She's searching for something, and we hear a faint chant indicating there's a crowd waiting impatiently for her. She employs the worst possible method for finding things by running around and opening lockers at random. Despite this, she manages to find her own locker? What? They have numbers for a reason. She quickly gets changed into her cheerleader outfit, wasting no time with any sort of appropriate supportive garments. She has fans to please. Unfortunately, we find out that the only fans awaiting her are her parents, making the bra choice incredibly regrettable. We can surmise that we've happened upon Allison in the middle of a nightmare sequence, and she proceeds to utterly fail at completing the simplest of cheer routines. The disapproval of her parents is palpable. While working through her nerves, her arm gets Krugered, but determined to finish her cheer, she continues on. However, it seems to be implied that her slash marks came from her now sentient pom-poms, which appear to be bent on punishing substandard performances, as they promptly consume her. When she wakes up, we find out she's been sleeping in a van occupied by her cheer squad, and was being creepily videotaped by Timmy, the team's lovable, goofy dickhead. His role throughout the film would be to walk the razor's edge of comedic relief and insatiable voyeurism. A heavy burden for sure. We find out that the van is being driven by Leif Garrett, so we can only assume they're on their way to hell. As it turns out, Leif, playing Brent, is driving the crew to a cheerleading competition, which takes the form of a week-long summer camp. If you were raised on the plethora of competitive cheerleading movies we've been blessed with over the last decade or so, this movie is going to be like peering into a dark gray world of pain and despair. As they roll up, we get a view of the competition. And things are looking pretty good for them if they have even a moderate amount of training. Timmy decides to start this party off right by presenting us with what can be described as an objectively huge ass. It literally fills the window, and him getting stuck is possibly the most believable part of the movie. Miss Tipton, the head of the competition, who we later come to find out is also the sole judge at this lightly staffed event, comes up to check the group in, give them some instruction, and contract a raging case of conjunctivitis. Next, we get a little setup on the events and character development to come. It's not initially clear, but Allison and Brent are actually dating. Despite this, Brent immediately begins to openly flirt with other girls, while Pam makes an odd comment about how to keep one's man from going with another gal.
Tough competition. She looks like the one to beat if you want to be queen. The one to beat up if you want to keep your man.
Is it unreasonable to expect him to act like a decent human being? We learn from the groundskeeper Pop that no matter how many employees a camp has, at least one of them has to be super scuzzy. And then Brent gets shut down by Susie.
Yeah, well, I still think you're beautiful, and your eyes, they told me to come over here.
Well, my lips tell you to go.
The girls then find themselves back in their room where they immediately turn on each other for the sake of winning the queen competition.
I'm gonna win that queen contest. What about Allison? She won't last.
We find out that Allison is taking prescription pills, presumably for her sleep issues, and we're introduced to Lucinda Dickey's character Corey, who plays the team mascot, a position that is apparently required, but that seems to be almost universally reviled. Unpacked and ready to relax, a group of girls goes down to the river to sunbathe on top of some boulders like a bunch of lizards in a beer commercial. There are no lifeguards on duty to keep things safe, but that's okay, because the sheriff is helpfully keeping an eye on them from behind some tall grasses, so as not to make them uncomfortable by his greasy visage. The girls have a conversation that reveals Susie is considered a shoo-in to win the aforementioned queen competition. Wanting to one-up her, Pam decides to take off her top as well. To win votes? Hey, who's voting for this competition, and who is she trying to persuade here? Do the other ladies base their votes on toplessness? Anyway, getting creeped on from all sides, Timmy, surreptitiously filming the group, accidentally makes a noise that announces his presence. But don't worry, he came prepared with an excuse
Trying to commune with nature.
and a disguise. Unfortunately for him, no one's fooled. He gets stripped down and makes his escape by drowning himself in the river. Oh, I guess he's just swimming away. You know you're all going to end up back at the same place, right? Back at camp, the squads are getting in some practice sessions. And then we're treated to a fade to red? I don't see many of those nowadays. And it leads straight to Allison sleeping, quietly dreaming of all the parts of the movie we just watched. She wanders outside in a fugue state and makes her way to an adjacent cabin where she finds Susie dead. Pop jump scares her and then casually observes the body. After the campers get their fill and Timmy finishes his film project, Miss Tipton runs everyone off and instructs her employees to hurry up and clean things up.
Would you hurry up, for Pete's sake?
Dee Dee, get off my back. I'm taking care of it, okay?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're qualified to properly handle a dead body, and shouldn't the police be involved in this? We get an immediate transition into a camp meeting to discuss the tragedy. Tipton, presented with an opportunity to redeem herself, takes the opposite route and assails the campers with a strange speech about Susie's personal demons. It's only vaguely anti-suicide and partially anti-Susie for some reason. Anyway, the girls retire to their cabin to discuss the possibility of foul play, something that they suspect for no discernible reason, and then punctuate this conversation with a little dirty talk.
It really gives me the creeps. I bet he'd like to give you more than that.
Meanwhile, Timmy's watching his archival footage of the now-deceased Susie, demonstrating that there are indeed no limits to the depths he's willing to plunge in pursuit of his voyeuristic desires. Corey and Allison have their own conversation about the events of the day and the pressures of trying to live one's best life as a cheerleader. Corey performs some acting, and questions whether Allison was jealous of Susie, casting aspersions in her direction. Allison, already full of doubt about her somnambulistic activities and wondering about her own strengths and capabilities, ceremoniously cleanses herself of guilt, but to no avail as she raises her face to reveal a Bloody Mary-style reflection of her soul. Cut to the next morning's jam sesh, and the whole gang is together practicing their routine. We come to find out that the two guys on the squad aren't only basemen, as they spit bars the likes of which have never been heard, accompanied by some sick beats.
Bitch, she ain't no sham. Next is Ronnie. She acts kinda funny. Steal your heart, but not your money.
Okay, stop. Please, I can't even listen to this ironically. The lyrics are essentially about how good of a cheer squad they are. I don't agree, but apparently the performance is so explosive it makes Pop bukkake himself with a garden hose. Look at him there, all covered in that sweet, sweet honey. Meanwhile, the mascots have been relegated to a strange sort of boot camp that involves them completing mundane daily tasks rendered nearly impossible by their costumes, like eating lunch with their head masks on. Prior to this, we've only seen implications of the general negative attitude toward the mascots, but this clearly demonstrates that they occupy an odd space in this movie. They're part of each team, but universally hated by everyone, including their own team. Why are they even there? Does eating lunch that way make them better mascots somehow? Allison checks back in with Brent.
How you doing?
You mean now that his flirt partner has died? She heads back to the kitchen for a refreshing glass of milk and has Susie's body roll onto her. They were keeping her on ice in the walk-in. Gross. This is by far the worst code violation of any camp movie we've discussed. The police finally show up, but it's Officer Peeps, so you know something sketchy's going down. We find out that the icebox solution was only temporary. Miss Tipton just wanted to keep her chilled until the week was over so as not to ruin camp. She would have reported it just in time for Susie's parents to momentarily wonder why she didn't get off the bus at pickup. This plan sounds good to the sheriff, so we temporarily keep things contained to the camp. We find out that this questionable plan was approved because the sheriff and Miss Tipton have a weird thing going on between them. A fact revealed in one of the most awkward but encouraging.
Come on, madam! Come on, madam!
He's coming downfield, straight on me. Transferring the ball. He looks great.
You can do it!
He sees the goal.
Sex scenes ever. I'm using air quotes around sex here. This scene was not edited in a way that gives me any confidence that they achieve more than a mere dry humping. Of course, Timmy is filming this. He returns to Brent, graphically stuffing his underwear. They have a brief conversation, and then we're brought back to Allison snooping around. Shouldn't she be practicing or something? Anyway, she's rooting around in an old utility shed when she's forced to duck behind a refrigerator as Pop comes in. She's real nervous about being caught, but it's not exactly clear why. I mean, the shed was unlocked. Maybe she just needed to borrow a rusty thresher. Pop grabs his afternoon beer and gets back to work. We're then treated to a confounding conversation that takes place in front of a mirror.
It's tropical look. Looks more like the floor of a movie theater on Saturday night. Is that good? 5 o'clock shadow?
What the hell are you on about? Allison has a flower pick and walk with Corey where she shares her confusing life philosophy.
Wish I could be more certain. Is it for me or is it for the people who are telling me what I should be doing? We're gonna be out in the real world soon. Who do you win for out there? We gotta be sure what we're doing is what we want to be doing. Before we figure out who wants what, a person could go crazy. That's nice.
Well, at least she seems to be in a more positive mind space. And then we find ourselves back in the main cabin lobby for a multimedia presentation from Miss Tipton. However, the event is hijacked by Timmy, who patches in the alleged sex tape, which is enough to drive the audience absolutely nuts. Timmy expresses his self-satisfaction.
God, I slaved you. I absolutely slay me.
As the group disperses and Allison has a chat with Brent, she's not happy with his flirtatious nature, and we find out that basically everyone wants a piece of him.
Even Pam's starting to get ideas about you.
He allays all fears and confirms his dedication to monogamy with an epic kiss.
How's that?
Mediocre at best, and then takes advantage of this goodwill by trying to pressure Allison into laying with him. This goes predictably bad, and they resume being the boyfriend-girlfriend pair that never actually spends any time together. They go to find the warm comfort of their respective roommates, where Brent whines like a selfish little bitch.
Maybe she could use a little attention.
Yeah, well, so could I.
And Corey turns the lights out on Allison while she sobs into her pillow.
Good night, Corey.
Another fade to red, but now we're in Allison's dream for sure as she watches Pam get some daytime sex with Brent in front of a crowd of enthusiastic perverts. Despite this, Allison is up the next morning looking rested as the group practices their routine. Unfortunately, a blocking mistake causes Allison to take a tumble, and the jolt brings her dream rushing to the forefront of her mind. Allison, remembering what she dreamt about and holding Pam responsible for the actions in which she partook during the dream, recently remembered of her by Allison, and for within which she clearly has sufficient reason for blame. Allison obviously gets mad at her for this and runs off. Seems reasonable. The squad decides to cool off by the river on their lizard rocks, and Brent decides to ramp up his shittiness by openly flaunting his flirtations with Pam, giving her a sensual massage in front of everyone. The group disbands, leaving Brent and Pam alone. This leads to some kissing, followed by Brent's go-to move of applying an urgent and desperate pressure for sex. When this doesn't work, Brent storms off in a huff. Pam almost immediately regrets this, however, and attempts to prove Brent wrong by submitting to his desires. What do you know, it worked, Brent! She doesn't manage to find him, though, before receiving the worst kind of haircut imaginable, an unsolicited one. Then we fade to red. In another nightmare sequence, we see Pam getting sliced by Pom Poms, which is the only reason the beginning sequence is now understandable. Allison wakes to Corey hovering over her in the dark and wearing her full mascot costume for some reason. She starts grabbing for her pills when Corey tries to persuade her to stop.
No more pills, Allison.
Yeah, if those are doctor prescribed, you should probably keep your opinions to yourself. Cut to a conversation that provides us the most notable quote from Bonnie.
Getting honey on her muffin.
Oh yeah. And then we get on to the big show. The official cheer competition we've been working on. Not very hard, but when we've been able to find time here and there over the last few days. We start with the mascot competition where Lucinda is finally able to cast off the chains that bind her and spread her wings in flight. Oh. Well, I guess it's hard to get the moves to read when draped in full head-to-toe mascot regalia. During the sequence, we get a brief glimpse of Timmy expressing sympathy toward Allison about her bad dreams, a brief respite from his nearly constant sexual predation. Back to the competition where Corey is clearly robbed. Hey! None of those other mascots were classically trained dancers. The fix is obvious when we see that they're voting by applause, a technique used almost exclusively to allow the judges to manipulate the outcome. Allison has more doubts about whether she has been sleep-killing people, and then back to the contest where 5 squads of 40-year-old high school cheerleaders compete on a fireplace in a cabin lobby that holds 25 people max. We get to our squad's turn, but the team has doubts. Now forced to take the stage one member down, having never found Pam, Brent gives a speech of his life to rally the troops as they take the stage. I honestly thought this was where Corey would step in, insist she knew the routine by heart, and save the day. But this movie defies all convention. They begin doing the Dance of the Dead, engaging in a routine that we never saw them practice. Despite the signals your eyes are sending to your brain right now, the parties present at the event seem to be momentarily enjoying the show. Pop and the chef are grooving, then Timmy pulls a Timmy and severely herniates several discs as he falls on Pop. All that rallying and it's over as quickly as it began. Hey. They may be losers, but at least Timmy's having fun, you maniac. Miss Tipton is understandably upset that they're making a mockery of her little cheer thing, but it's explained that they had to use a different routine due to being a member down without Pam. What? After all we've been through, this movie's now filling plot holes? We then move on to the final competition, and the last chance for the team to redeem themselves. Brent tells Bonnie and Allison to pretty themselves up and do their best. Without the sex pot Pam, it's on them to be the most sexually alluring cheerleaders. To the other cheerleaders, of course, as this cheer competition turns into a beauty pageant. Another applause vote allows Tipton to choose whomever she'd like, since each team is likely just cheering for their own member, causing us to ponder, what are we trying to prove here? And why is any of this worth improperly handling a dead body? Thankfully, Bonnie wins for the team and manages to bring some level of redemption. Afterward, they're all treated to a full band performance, which has to be awkward for the musicians, since there are only about 20 people in attendance. Amidst the partying, Brent realizes that Teresa is now also gone, having left to find Pam. So he goes to find her. Corey goes off to help in the search, and Pop goes to keep an eye on them.
Just an eye.
Right, that's what I just said. While walking normally, Teresa takes an unnecessary tumble. Pop describes what he finds so distasteful about the kids.
All that flesh hanging out everywhere.
Gross. But that's also why you've been creeping on them, right? Anyway, Teresa sees someone resting against a tree, so she falls down again as she approaches. Despite the fact that she's approaching from the front, she doesn't see the state of Pam until we do. Thanks, editor. Sharing this experience makes me feel closer to Teresa. Shocked by the sight of Pam regurgitating a pair of hedging shears, she immediately flees and is promptly run down by her team's van as she takes the ill-advised tactic of standing directly in front of a tree. Hey, Timmy. Slow down, man. Allison and Brent discuss their next steps. Brent wants to search tomorrow, trying to convince Allison that the sheriff can't do anything to help them. Timmy gets absolutely lit, has a brief and awkward interaction with another cheerleader before hauling her off like a caveman. This character is listed in the credits as Timmy's girlfriend, but I'm not convinced he's not just racking up another felony offense. I mean, seriously, who decided Timmy was ready for a sleepaway camp? This guy needs constant supervision. We return to Brent and Allison to find out that Brent doesn't want the sheriff there because he assumes he'd be a suspect. Good looking out, Brent. At this point, everyone's a suspect. Meanwhile, Miss Tipton decides to take a drunken midnight trail walk to find the missing girls, and gets herself poked in the back by an unknown object. Timmy shows up back at the party with his hands drenched in blood, while his friend grins like Caesar Romero. We discover that he's found Teresa, but with her insides on the outside. So, are we to assume that Timmy dipped his hand in there? Allison runs into Miss Tipton, who finally falls over to reveal she has a meat cleaver in her back. They really do try to cast insinuations about every character in this movie. Brent, finally stepping up, notifies the crowd of the situation and provides useful instructions.
Now stay calm, but one of our girls has been murdered, all right? Don't panic.
The camp immediately clears out so we can have a proper horror movie ending, as the main characters are forced to stay behind since they're all split up. Brent goes off to group up and pulls off this epic pratfall without a double. Then they all find each other and attempt to leave, only to find that the van's been sabotaged. The closest town is 40 miles away, but they all agree that walking is better than dying. So they do that instead of the other. Timmy shows that he can't hold it together, even under the threat of death, as he blows off steam by joking and filming. Pop catches up with him and forces them back to the camp with logic.
Your girl's dead. Go on back now.
Boom!
As the group flees, Timmy decides to take a break to start vlogging. Experience your moment, Timmy.
Why'd you run off like that?
Shotgun?
Where's Timmy?
He stayed to take pictures.
That's crazy.
Yes, it is. Brent tries to go help Timmy, but only finds his camera. They decide to see if there are any clues to his fate by watching the tape, in a scene that clearly rips off the Scream franchise. For what feels like the 10th time the movie shows us footage we've already had the pleasure of viewing, until we get to the end and discover that Timmy's all good. He just peed, dropped his sack of wet sausages, and then bent down to dust them off. If you think you're ready for a resolution now, think again. This movie's ending is just getting started, as the group begins to set a booby trap in Pop's shed, assuming that he was Timmy's killer. They lie in wait to spring their foolproof trap. Success! Oh wait, they bear trap the sheriff. Brent decides to end this once and for all, grabbing an axe and going to chop down a tree. He's confronted by Pop, who's shot by Corey, having taken the gun from the sheriff. Allison's flashbacks rage while Brent does what Brent does best, comfort the ladies. After a few chuckles and some wine, Brent sends off Bonnie and Corey so he has an opportunity to take his prize. When this goes poorly, he storms off once again like a little baby. Corey circles back to find Allison and tries to convince her that Brent is the killer. They go to find him and observe him standing awkwardly over a now dead Bonnie. Corey gives Allison the gun and gets her all jacked up, convincing her to shoot amidst the excitement, which she does, hitting what can only be described as a miraculous kill shot from this distance. Allison now enters a waking nightmare as the impact of what she's done causes her to have a full-on breakdown while the police and EMTs arrive. She's carted off and we see Corey giving an unusual and inaccurate account of the evening's events, as she expresses an eerie sense of satisfaction in the final outcome. We learn that Allison's fate is essentially sealed by the detectives who choose to ignore the concept of due process.
Your testimony. She'll be charged with the murders.
Hey, this is hard work, and they had to drive 40 miles to get here. The ambulance drives off with Allison as we get a slow reveal that Corey was the killer all along, killing everyone she could get her hands on after becoming fed up with being constantly treated like a piece of human garbage due to her passion for mascotting. And that's it for Cheerleader Camp, a fun, tongue-in-cheek slasher film that seems like it may have been serious, but could really be appreciated in either context. This is also a wrap for Lucinda Dickey, who didn't have another starring movie role after this. Her acting career had an interesting cadence, being in 4 movies in the 80s. 3 of them, Breakin', Breakin' 2, and Ninja 3: The Domination, were produced by the tireless schlock powerhouse Cannon Films, and they were all released in 1984. So 3 films in 1 year, then another one 4 years later, and that's it. 4 and out, although it's hard to imagine a more distinctive catalog of credits. It's somewhat hard to find this movie, although it does show up on streaming services from time to time. I recommend you check it out when it's available. I also hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching.